And last but not least, we have my friend Dan. I'm going to advance a slide here. There we go. Dan, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks for having me. Pretty excited to share this.
Awesome. Fantastic. I'm excited to hear about it.
All right. Well, my name is Dan Bolinson. I'm a Tableau DataDev Ambassador since last year and do a lot of work focused on Tableau extensions, Tableau dashboard extensions. And so today I'm going to share with you guys a dashboard we developed for TC24 to sort of showcase some of how Tableau extensions can really push our dashboards into more full-fledged data products. So I work with Baker Tilly. We are a top 10 accounting firm, and I work in our advisory practice. So I split my time between a lot of management consulting and then more of the Tableau specific work. And we do a ton of work in supply chain. So this is an example that's pretty close to my heart. We do a lot of work with supply chain network design. And so this the use case that we built out for Tableau conference is really focused on that. So to dive in, first off, let's cover what are Tableau dashboard extensions. And so what Tableau dashboard extensions let us do is they let us extend our dashboards into a whole host of new use cases by attaching new behavior to those dashboards. They are presented to us as an API, so it kind of exposes a lot of what's going on our dashboards to us through code that we can then do things with. And that might be, writing back to third-party data sources, or it might be to create some new forms of engagement and filters on the dashboard. And so really, it's just a way to open up Tableau in all sorts of new ways. And I'm pretty excited to share the supply chain example today. So you may have heard of dashboard extensions. There's a whole host of dashboard extensions on the exchange, and they really do a good job of capturing some of the use cases. I think that what we focus on is developing extensions and supporting folks in building their own extensions. So the key hypothesis there is that much of the time, the most important use cases that are valuable in the context of dashboard extensions are use cases that are specific to the business process that someone is operating in. And so by creating a mechanism that we can build Tableau extensions quickly and easily and put that capability into the hands of the dashboard developers, we'll really see a lot of uptake on that. And that's really kind of the key to unlocking some of the value of what extensions offer in terms of taking Tableau and applying it in a lot of use cases. So with that in mind, we're going to focus on a Tableau extension that we built, and we'll cover how we built that. So that's really one of my major priorities, is to focus on like how we built that and sort of peek behind the curtain. The presentation that I delivered at Tableau conference was really focused on helping people and convincing people they could build extensions themselves. And so I really feel that and encourage you to reach out if you're curious about that. And we can talk more about that, but we'll focus really today on something that we did rather than what can be done. But as I said, what can be done with Tableau extensions is really to do with connecting to other assets. A really common use case is going to be to write back data. So whether it's writing back to source data or layering in some other data that's persisted to help us enrich that dashboard. Persistence of data from input from the user is a really common use case, and we'll see elements of that in the example today. Another common use case is to trigger a model or parameterize a model that lives elsewhere, and that's another kind of core idea behind the supply chain model we'll cover when that model doesn't run in Tableau, but we still want to visualize some of the outputs. And so, what we did for Tableau conference was really to gamify it. So today we'll share a little bit of a game that was built with Tableau extensions, and you may have seen some other great games that have been built with this framework in the past too. So today I'm going to share with you a supply chain optimization dashboard. And so we're really going to try to show off the platform that was used to build it and convince you that that it's accessible. And I want to give credit to Brady Sullivan, who was really the architect of a lot of the Tableau dashboards that we're going to look at today. So with that in mind, I'm going to share my screen. And I am going to load this dashboard in author mode. So just so we can sort of get a little bit of a peek on what's going on. So this is the dashboard. And as I first load this, I'm going to see a pop-up here that's going to give me a little bit of a context of like, hey, who are you? What do you want to do? And so I want to, in this case, start a new game. And so, right away, we're seeing that we've been greeted with a modal that has prompted us to give some information. And that's going to really direct our experience through this application. So I'll start a new game. I'm going to call myself Dan Live, and let's go. So in this case, I'm going to get a little bit more information about what this is all about. So our objective here is that we are a supply chain guru working for Tableau Logistics with a plant in San Diego, and we have to decide where we want to build distribution centers around the country to reduce our supply chain costs. So this is a pretty common supply chain network design question in terms of like, how do I optimize my supply chain by building new assets? And so often where we'll start here is by looking at what is the cost to serve our customers. So not surprisingly, since we've got a single factory in San Diego, it's going to be really expensive to serve the East Coast. And we get a little bit of a sense of where those most expensive customers are. These are the location of customers sized by their demand last year. And we can also get a sense of like our customer growth over time and where in the region we're seeing the most sales. So, pretty vanilla dashboard to help us understand the performance of our supply chain and where that growth is occurring. And so now I'm going to jump to another dashboard where we'll dive into sort of more of the gamification aspect. So in this case, we are going to be asked to start to make those key decisions as to where we want to build our supply chain. So we're going to get some more information. We can choose to build large DCs, medium DCs, or small DCs. And as I click on the yellow site locations, the extension, which is right here, is going to respond to that click and ask me, hey, do I want to build a distribution center in Seattle? And I can build a small one, a medium one, or a large one. And so in this case, I can start to make those key decisions. And this is the type of activity that we are often incorporating into things like sales and operations planning. So there's a element here where we're trying to take this information that's being exposed to people and the insight that we're creating for people in this dashboard and trying to encourage them to take action and really do something with that. So we're going to choose to build a small DC in Seattle. And that's going to, go green as we've opted to build something there. Maybe we'll build one in Minneapolis. I think that probably deserves a large DC. And then we can maybe do one more in Charlotte, sure. So as I'm going through here, I'm starting to effectively parameterize a supply chain model that we're then going to run to see how that affects our cost to serve, our customer cost to serve. So when I think I'm ready, I can click submit my plan. I'm about to spend 33 million bucks. Let's do it. And that's going to then tell me that I'm ready to review my results. So if I click here, you'll notice that these buttons just appeared because of something that I did in my extension. And I'm going to flip to this dashboard, which is actually going to run the supply chain model. So what's happening right now is that we've effectively taken that user input and injected that into a linear programming model. So linear programming is a great set of tools that let us, it's basically optimization. And so in this case, we are taking that set of decisions and optimizing to say, hey, how is that going to affect my theoretical performance of my supply chain? And that's going to give me a sense of if that decision set was a good idea or not. So we can take a look and view our results, and we're going to see the output here where these customers are now colored by where they'll be served from. So we built a new facility in Charlotte, we built a new facility in Seattle and one in Minneapolis, and we see the color of the customers based on where they'll be served from in that future state. And that's really the key output of the optimization model. And so based on the ability to serve those customers from those DCs, that's going to have an implication on our shipping cost. And we can see whether or not we saved money. And we see in this case that DC in Charlotte was a poor choice. It's underutilized, and we spent more money than we saved on that. So my bad, shouldn't have done that one. But what that tells us now is that, we've starting to get a sense of where those cost savings occurred. And, again, being this being a game, we can see how we did on the leaderboard. So I got 23rd. I'm not thrilled about that, but that tells us this is kind of, the key part for supply chain or for the Tableau conference was to try to gamify it a little bit. And so that's the app we built that was really leveraged the extensions framework pretty heavily. And I want to now talk a little bit about how we did that, specifically some of the techniques we used. And so back to my slides here. First off, I have to call out that this was all built using Anvil X. And so for us, we are a team of data science and analysts. These dashboard extensions are fundamentally web applications. And so for us, we're not full stack web developers, but Anvil X has allowed us to develop extensions and get some of the value out of them knowing just Python. So Anvil X is a way of building Tableau extensions with just Python. And I'll show a little bit behind the scenes there of what that means. Practically, what's happening is our dashboard is, I'm making selections on our dashboard and things are happening on our dashboard. And those are basically creating events. And as those events are occurring, I'm able to then detect that in my extension and take action. So when I was making selections on my map about where a DC location might be, I can then create change the UI to tell people hey, do you want to build in a DC here? And so as things are going on that dashboard, then we can do things on our extension. And meanwhile, when the extension detects that we're ready to run that model, we can run that model and then update the data in our data source. So it's this two-way communication between our extension and our dashboard where a lot of that magic happens. And the key part here is that Python code that our extension is running is driving that activity with our dashboard. And if folks are familiar with the extension framework or otherwise just familiar with web dev, they're probably raising their eyes right now because Python doesn't run in the browser. That's not how that works. But that is sort of the key takeaway here, that what Anvil offers is the way to build extensions knowing just Python and running Python client side in the browser, which really does enable a lot of the use cases, which we'll show sort of next. I also want to call out that a lot of what we'll show here relies on the T-Rex jacket. So the T-Rex jacket is a wrapper over the JavaScript API that you can learn more about here. And I'm going to point out this resource a couple more times. It's a really great resource to get started. It includes a bunch of guides and tutorials, and then gives you the full API reference too for what this is and what you can do with it. So as far as getting started, the T-Rex jacket is absolutely the place to start, and it really does offer some really useful utilities to make developing extensions really pretty straightforward. So as we're thinking about Anvil X, I just want to highlight that this is not an extension. I'm not trying to leave you with the idea that Anvil X is supply chain network design and you can go do that yourself. It's really the idea is that this is a way to build extensions for whatever use case makes sense for you. It provides a way to persist data, which we'll show as well. And this really helps us give that full-fledged data product perspective on what this can be. So I'm going to share my screen again and talk through some of the key techniques we used to make this pull this all together. First off, there's a single application here with different screens depending on the dashboard that we're in. So this is Anvil. This is what we've built this in. And so this is the Python code that's driving the entire extension. We're obviously not going to walk through all of this. I'm just going to try to pick out some of the key techniques we use to make this all work. And the first one is that we are figuring out which dashboard we're working in. So if our dashboard is view historical demand, then we're going to go to this demand router page. If the dashboard name is make your capital decision, we're going to go to the decision maker page. And that's these pages here on the left. So as we're thinking about this, this is the code that's running, and these are the UIs that have been built. So the UIs are all drag and drop. So as I'm building this out, there's all the components, the text boxes and buttons that I can drag into my UI. I can move them around if I need to, but this is the UI that's been built, and this is the code that's running behind it. So once I've identified which screen I need to go to, I'm often wanting to capture user input, and I can do that through that UI. I might also want to do it through modals. We saw a couple different examples of us using a modal, and the way that that works is that I'm able to simply call the dialogues.showForm. So this is, again, the T-Rex jacket that has sort of wrapped some of the Tableau extensions framework capabilities to just abstract it a little bit. So if I need to show a modal, it's as easy as just calling dialogues.showForm, where I'm passing it the form that I want to pass here. So we see splash screens, instruction splash. So this is the thing that we're showing to somebody if, in that specific workflow. The other thing that we're doing is keeping track of the user. And a big part of this application in particular is following this user through as they are building this model that's specific to them. And that's kind of a key idea. So might have a lot of different users who are all using this dashboard at the same time. And so part of what we've done here is attach a lot of that information about the game that this user is playing to that user themselves. So as part of Anvil, we have like a data model here. And so the users is like all of the people who are playing this game, and we're linking them to the actual scenario that they're playing, which is where they're making some of those types of decisions around, like, I want to build a large DC in location 17. And so that's a really useful way to start to basically curate the experience that a user is having. Oftentimes that's going to be based on like who that user is. So we at conference, we talked a lot about a sales forecasting use case. And that was really driven by like who that is, that user the VP of sales or is a sales individual, and tailoring their experience to that, including sort of some of the row level security that they might be subject to. And so those are sort of some of the techniques we can use to drive that user's experience through the application and attach data to that. There was also a lot of aspects of like visibility. So we only wanted to show people this review your results button once they had actually gotten through having made their capital assignment decision. So having decided that they were going to build these different DCs. And so there's the zone visibility is all abstracted or is all available to us too. So we can set the zone visibility for really anything on our dashboard to be visible or invisible by setting their zone visibility, which again gives like a whole rich way of exposing our users to what's going on that dashboard, depending on where they are in a business process or who they are based on their user. One other thing I wanted to show was specifically how we did this. So this is a dashboard with a bunch of different locations that are, obviously marks on this. And as we are selecting these, we're giving people the way to opt in to build a distribution center. And then we, colored that based on the user selection. And we did that using parameters. We use parameters a ton when we're building these types of UI, just because they are sort of this, hack in building extensions that communicate with the dashboards. They can store any string, which means they can store JSON, which means they can restore like pretty rich amounts of data that we'll then use throughout. So we, like in this case, as we're selecting these, we're just appending like that location to the parameter as a string. And then in order to show whether or not that user made that selection, we are attaching that in like, is the DC been selected? Oh, sorry, the wrong mark, which is using the find function to say like, hey, is that city name in that parameter? And so that gives us a really performant way to highlight that user selection We're not having to go back to the data source because that will really add a lot of latency. And is a really, I think, a good example of how flexible parameters are when building them in the context of extensions. And the last thing I wanted to share was how, I should actually point out how we're doing that. So here we're saying, hey, take that selected DC parameter value and just append the name of the mark that got selected. And so there's a decent amount going on here, but at the end of the day, I think the key is that that workflow is pretty straightforward. I'll maybe just point out here too, that a lot of what we're doing is using the dashboard object. And so to give a sense of what's exposed there, the autocomplete is going to give us a sense of, like, we can get our data sources, our filters, our worksheets. Really, all of the different information that exists on the dashboard is exposed to us through this object, as all of these Tableau entities on the dashboard are sort of brought into Python land for us to interact with. The last thing I'll show is the way that we ran the actual model. So that model obviously lives in a Python function server side. And so what we can do is call that Python function run scenario from our client code. So it feels like calling a Python function, but this is actually running then on our server, which is how we're able to use some of those, like, more exotic libraries that let us run that linear programming. And so that's, like, a really, again, a common pattern where we've got some model that's not fitting into Tableau, but we need to run it and then expose the data, expose the results to the users. And we'll do that by, like, putting it into this data table that then our Tableau dashboard is connected to. So what I wanted to really highlight here is that Anvil X is a really helpful way of building extensions and create a whole rich set of how to build out new ways of our users to interact in a dashboard. So I think I covered a lot. I hope that was interesting. You know, I think that that's obviously like a fully fledged app, and there's a lot to take in there. But all of those building blocks are simple Python functions and simple attributes of that. So definitely take a look if that's of interest. I'll point out again that T-Rex jacket, which has some really useful guides to get started. And I think I've used up all my time. Thank you, everybody, for your attention there. I hope that was interesting. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me by email. I'd love to hear from you, or schedule a demo if that's, if you want to dive in a little bit deeper.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.